Welcome to the Indian Silicon Valley podcast. I'm your host, Jivraj, and today I'm joined by one of the most legendary investors from the Indian ecosystem. Thank you so much, Prashanth, for joining me. I'm absolutely delighted and super honored to be hosting you today.
Thank you, Jivraj. Thank you for hosting me here and look forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Prashanth. And I'm so excited pretty much because of your depth of experiences and the way you were such an early starter in the venture space in India. But I want to address the moment of success right now. And I want to get your opinion there very early on as to we've seen the Freshworks IPO right now, and we're sitting at the helm of it. What has that meant for the Accel family? What has that meant personally for you? And how has that, shaped the future vision for you? I think that'd be a great starting point for the conversation.
Yeah, so Jivraj, I'd like to give some context to this whole how Freshworks happened and
Yes,
the overall way we approach investing. It's a very nice segue to kind of talk about it, and then I'll come to
sure.
Freshworks. So I think this goes back to what is venture investing itself.
Right.
If you want to even take a step back.
Yeah.
I think venture investing is really about looking at 5-10 years ahead, right? So, and I think, and of course, the Valley, and as your podcast name says, I think has been the pioneer in demonstrating that and being able to do something like that. But when we started out in India in 2006, 7 as Erasmic, and then became Accel.
Yeah.
So we were we always thought that we as a firm, as our philosophy, should follow this whole prepared mind thesis that Accel globally as kind of pioneered, which is how do you kind of get to a state where you know what to expect in terms of what entrepreneurs are kind of cooking out there, right? So you really don't know how exactly and what exactly to do necessarily. And I don't think investors are the best people to do that. I think entrepreneurs are the best to know what exactly to do. But in terms of zeroing and kind of zoning in on a space, I think it's something that we have said, that we need to have some foresight on that, so to speak. And that led us to e-commerce. And when nobody in India believed e-commerce, and the Flipkart story, and the journey with Flipkart all the way to the Walmart exit. So Flipkart not only created e-commerce as a space, but created, in my mind, the whole platform, and was the kind of the underlying aspiration for the next 100 startups in this country.
Absolutely.
Right? So and that it is really that way for the last 1 decade, and a decade plus, that we were able to kind of seed and help multiply the impact of one company into hundreds of companies in this ecosystem. So we were around 2-3 years after Flipkart. We're looking at what could be the next ecosystem. I mean, what could be the next such white space or next such India opportunity. And we had seen a little bit of the global cross-border opportunity through MuSigma. And we saw, how a next generation analytics company can kind of build a very differentiated offering in spite of having all these large IT majors, Infosys, Cognizant, still MuSigma kind of carved out a niche or a space for themselves. And that's around the time when we were looking at what next, that Girish had just seeded Freshworks, and he intersected with my partners Anand and Shekhar. And Shekhar took the call to say that, because he, and there's a little bit of a background there. So Shekhar and me go way back. In my second startup, Shekhar was a customer, and Shekhar was in the Valley then, in the Silicon Valley. He was the CTO of a couple of companies, and we were providing services for Shekhar in the US. And anyway, then later Shekhar came back to India as part of VeriSign and joined. So Shekhar had a good sense for enterprise and good sense for what is the opportunity for something like Freshworks for the in the global world, and because a lot of the engineering that was done for the products that Shekhar built in the US were actually done in Bangalore. So these were cutting edge products for Motorola, these were, and a couple other companies that he built there, Lightsurf and so on. So I think Shekhar had the belief that you can actually build world-class enterprise software from here and compete with anybody in the world. Right. And that really, I think, was the seed and the starting point of the SaaS ecosystem in the country, which now everybody believes in, and also, coming back to the Freshworks opportunity, the Freshworks IPO kind of gives wings to this belief and thought that this is a $1 trillion opportunity from India, nothing less than. And I think it's glad that we already see about $10 billion plus companies. I think it's more than 10 now in the SaaS ecosystem. And a good set of those are from Accel, but it's getting more broad based, and we are starting to see other funds also kind of double down, and if SaaS has become the new
yes, definitely. No, but I think that was such a
and just to be one last point, I think we all like TAM, the notion of TAM when it comes to, but I think the idea of SaaS expanding the TAM opportunity for the Indian entrepreneur and Indians is the most exciting thing, right? It expands the TAM on two perspectives, right? It expands the TAM in terms of the overall spend in enterprise, global enterprise, right? Which is 10 times the opportunity of the Indian economy, so to speak, right? And the second is the ability to find global investors who relate to this opportunity, and global capital now seeing this as a mainstream opportunity to invest in Indian startups. So suddenly there is an expansion of opportunity on both ends, on revenue and also the familiarity of the business and investors across the globe being part of it. So great for the country.
Absolutely. No, I think such a landmark success, such a landmark moment for the ecosystem, and just restores belief that, if one company can, so can the others. And it just makes us all the more dreamy eyed. And it's great to have great folks like you supporting such founders. And I think this conversation also attributes to that in some shape or form. But I want to double click on that aspect, right? I mean, the context to your answer was very interesting. And that gets me to the point of what does venture partnerships really mean, right? Because I've heard a constant narrative from both you and let's say the leadership team of Accel when you talk about co-building, co-creating with founders, right? And that almost seems like a DNA now. Help us understand what, in your opinion, really means going through the life cycle of a company from seed to scale, as Accel stands for, and how do you build in that DNA culturally within the fund as well, right? I think that would be a good understanding of the entire Accel ideology and how you've been able to shape it up, especially given that, when you entered venture, when Accel was started as a fund in the country, there was no parallels as such, right? So it was mostly first principles thinking. So would love to hear your narrative on this.
Yeah, I think the roots of Accel and the roots of the precursor Erasmic were in actually two very interesting areas. Erasmic started out as an incubator, so we were pretty much the first technology incubator, and that's MuSigma was one of the early incubations. So we were always of the mindset that we got to roll up our sleeves and to whatever extent the entrepreneur can benefit from our insights, from our actionable insights, so to speak, right? And be able to help implement some of that and guide them in that implementation journey. I think that has always been a core underpinning of our thought of what should be our role as investors, right? The second thing that really helped is the passion and the love for creating. So creating, of course, I mean, when even as just an investor, you're playing a role in creation. But I think for us, I think the passion and the love to kind of walk along with the entrepreneur in a much more intimate fashion in this journey, even pre-product market fit. So it's that kind of love for taking up this challenge pre-product or pre-market fit, I think is what differentiates us at Accel from anybody else. And in that period, we also are different in another sense that we don't we're not doing some spray and pray, or we're not saying we want to invest in 100 200 of these and take an option value in them. We have conviction in that particular founder, we have conviction in that particular space, and we would like to double down in that space however early it is, and play the role of the co-creator, because we just love doing that. We just have a great passion for that early stage and discovering that product fit and discovering that early GTM. It just gives us, I think, in many cases, as much of a thrill as the IPO that happens later, right?
Yes.
So being just being so much embedded in that passion and being able to relate to that early journey of the entrepreneur, I think, and later we can talk about the whole ecosystem efforts of Accel, and that also kind of stems from that we just love doing that.
Absolutely. No, I think I would like to echo the fact that it's just great to see this passion, right? And this just completely defines and sets the record straight as to how much value venture investors can add, and that value addition can be true as it has been. But I want to, go ahead and further understand as to how much of these efforts internally at Accel have really been deliberate on the leadership's front, right? So how have you been able to scale culture within Accel itself, or maybe form a culture wherein you have, let's say, an operating team of sorts, right, where there are a bunch of folks working with founders and startup teams. There are multiple boot camps that happen. There's this global footprint that you take advantage of. Help us understand all of these anecdotes better, and how much of that comes from your lens as an entrepreneur in the shoes of a venture investor when you're building out Accel. I think that'll be a different perspective to get and will be very interesting to understand.
Yeah, so we have had an internal journey and also an internal kind of shift in thought process in this area. So when we started out, of course, it was the effort of us as partners to really help in this, what we call as venture development, right? Which is being hands-on, being able to, in specific areas, whether it's GTM or whether it is product building, scaling, be able to take specific initiatives, not just be board members asking questions, which is very important, of course, but also just post the board meeting, take up and co-own one of those initiatives along with the entrepreneur and take it to fruition, right? So that's what we were doing as partners, but it's not scalable. So our next step in this journey was, can we get a few folks within Accel in these specific verticals or specializations, either ex-entrepreneurs or maybe just people from the industry who just have that expertise. Can we get them to be supportive to the entrepreneur, and in some cases even go in to the company for a short period of time, work on the initiative and come out again, right? So we did a lot of that. So the first 3-4 years were just about us partners doing everything, the heavy lifting, so to speak. Then getting these venture partners or this venture development folks within the company. Then we said for the next 3-4 years, then we said, you know what, we're also hitting. Through this we are able to help companies within the Accel portfolio. But how do we support the whole ecosystem, right? How can we do a few things that not only helps this peer learning and learning across our portfolio companies, but how can we help multiply the startup ecosystem to hundreds and take the same distilled knowledge or these key insights to the rest of the ecosystem. So that's when two initiatives got started. One is the Accel Insights podcast that Anand got started with. And then we had seen a little bit of how, in a very small way, the SaaS Boomi ecosystem helped that whole nurture and help that whole early fledgling opportunity thrive. So we said, we asked Avinash to join us, and that's how Avinash came on board and started the whole community building effort. And like a lot of what we believe, and you got to think, and this is, no pun intended here, but we always want to be on the bright side of the dark side, right? Getting into venture and getting into investing is always considered in the dark side, but we want to show that that you can actually be on the bright side there, right? So in that effort, we said, can we build a set of programs, right, which all kind of fit together in this whole seed to scale umbrella, and you can create a platform and sometimes vertical specific initiatives, consumer, SaaS, B2B, so on. Avinash really did a great job. A lot of philosophically, a lot of his beliefs that when you are giving to the ecosystem, there is no, and there should be no immediate expectation, right? So a lot of this is true venture karma, so to speak, right? It's nothing that will get you something in the next 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. You don't know when you'll get what, but you just keep at it and keep giving. And that's what got us to this BrowserStack and a few other programs. The Rebound program, where we said we should also help entrepreneurs who probably didn't succeed the first time. Not many people are talking to them and trying to understand and see what went right, what went wrong, and now can we help them get started again. So some very unique programs, and of course, Avinash is famous for the treks that he would do with the entrepreneurs, the offsites, with very some interesting programs there. The badminton tournaments that we would have in Bangalore, which were huge hits, hundreds of teams playing over 2 days. So all these were very interesting dimensions of community building. One, just peer learning, like I said. Second, just networking and finding the right co-founders, maybe, or finding the right members of your team that you want to augment. And third, accelerating your journey and not making the same mistakes that otherwise you would have made, right? So that was the whole intent. And this we thought by kind of making this a Accel flagship initiative, it will also build culture within our own partnership, where the next generation of folks within Accel the next generation of principals, VPs, associates, analysts, all of them get to participate and get to see and enjoy this this whole community building exercise.
Yes, no, certainly. I think that reflects, and I can testify that those ecosystem objectives, those C2 scale blogs, we had Narayan on the show earlier as well, Narayan Thamar, who mentioned so much of the initiatives, and then the podcast itself. All of those have been such a great effort. Like that helps me personally for the show as well, and I'm sure it's helped multiple others. And I love the fact, going down memory lane and so many things that are ecosystem first. I mean, that just testifies to the having that ideology and going along with that, and how you've pioneered it. So kudos on that. I think for the next segment, Prashanth, I would love to understand how you've thought about things as a venture investor, right? I mean, just the thought process in general. The first question there I would like to ask is, more around identifying outliers, right? Because essentially venture becomes a business of understanding and identifying those outliers, right? And while all founders, I'm sure, are very, very special, there are these some folks, right? Like Sachin Bini of Flipkart, Girish of Freshworks, Ashish of BookMyShow, Sriharsh of Swiggy, whatnot, right? Who have really scaled to show that, large value propositions are possible. From your experience, A, how do you identify these outliers, if at all? B, what really makes these outliers special? I think that would be really, really interesting to gauge if you have any views there.
Yeah, so I think we find one very interesting thing, and of course this you get to kind of understand that or judge that or gauge that over time. But how much has the entrepreneur soaked in the mission? Of course, all of them claim, and many a times they do believe in the mission that they're set out to do, right? Whatever it could be. In the case of, for example, Harsha, it was a very simple mission that he wanted to be a hunger savior. So that for him, it was very clear that his entire mission was that he wanted to get food at the fastest. So he said, excellent food, if it came late to your home, is of no use, right? You want to have food when you really want it, and everything that he wanted to do, and he we saw him engineer, was very central in kind of achieving that mission. So you very quickly judge if the entrepreneur really has got to that very central idea, and has he or she ensured that everything that he is envisioning on the product, everything he's envisioning on the team that he's trying to build, and everything he's envisioning in terms of the understanding of the ecosystem are all aligned to that central mission, right? And in that process, also what happens is that we get quite a few kind of wow moments where you know that this is beyond just common sense, right? This entrepreneur has understood a few things that even if we within Accel tried to kind of dig into that particular space, and which is what we do as part of our prepared mind, we would not have got this insight. We would not have got to this central idea or thought. And it has only happened because this entrepreneur has just soaked in and just in mentally or otherwise lived that space so well in the last 1 or 2 years that he's been at it or she's been at it, that there is that belief that we want to now back, right? So that is one real very central part of the decision making process for me, and I think a lot of us at Accel. The second key part is can we work with that entrepreneur? And I know that it's even after 10-15 years of marriage, sometimes you don't know if you can live or work with your partner, but you're supposed to judge this in just 2 meetings or 3 meetings or sometimes 10 meetings. But it is very important to see that there is a meeting of the minds in terms of wanting our support, and us very, very clearly seeing the receptiveness from the entrepreneur of he or she benefiting from whatever capabilities and insights and our experience that we can bring to that startup. I think that really also is very important, because we want to, like I said, we don't invest in 10 startups out of which we know 7 are anyway option value and 3. When we invest in something, we know that whether it works or not. And this is very central to also our belief that we back the entrepreneur till the entrepreneur gives up. So it's not a situation where we get tired of a particular entrepreneur or a space, or say that if the entrepreneur is at it, we are also at it with him, right? So we want to make sure that the relatability in terms of our mindsets and what we want to do together for the next, in many cases, like I said, we need to be prepared for 10 years, is something that we would love and want to be part of that journey. I think this is, and I think when you do that, you naturally build a very synergistic relationship, which will help you build great outcomes, right? Otherwise, just that friction is going to slow down the company in the very early days, right? Absolutely. So that's I think really important. And I think third is, I think, the prepared mind part, which I had alluded to before. I think when we look at a startup, we don't build for momentum, as in because there are because it's the flavor of the
season,
the season or month or year. We build. I mean, we are participating with that series of meetings with the entrepreneur because we really believe that this space is of interest for us. We have a decent understanding of the space, and we know how to build good economics in that space, right? And this can be a profitable outcome for the entrepreneur and us. So it's this combination of conviction, compatibility, and preparedness from our side to believe that this is the space that we want to be part of. I think if these three intersect, there is this sweet spot of huge outcome. And I think that therein lies the outlier.
Absolutely. I love that framework. I think that's a lot of food for thought for everyone listening in, especially me. And I love the part about mission. I'd like to take a moment and, double click on the last part where you talk about prepared mind, especially given that, so many of these bets that you've taken over the years as Accel or personally as well have been, contrarian bets, right? As they call it. And that combined with a lot of the patterns that you see, right? You've seen a lot of failures. Now you've seen these breadth of deals and you know what works, what does not, at least on a surface level. How do you essentially map the contrarian bets vis-a-vis also pattern matching? Like, how do you maintain that right balance? And in that pursuit, go ahead with the prepared mind, as you mentioned. I think that would be great to hear.
So, there is both advantages and disadvantages to having some experience in this in the venture space. The advantages, of course, you've seen a pattern, but then there is also the negative aspects of history and missing out on something just because it didn't work 3 years ago or 4 years ago. So that kind of negative biases from the past also, it's another dimension. So you have this intuition and the prepared mind aspect, and then you have the pattern matching aspect, and then you have the negative biases from the past, which can also cloud you sometimes and cloud your thinking. Right. So, but I think what is really important is, in my mind, still the prepared mind part compared to the pattern matching aspects. And I would always overweight prepared mind over pattern matching, because pattern matching always assumes that the space that you are going to now look at already has some history, already has some set of defined successes, and has a set of defined things that could work, and you kind of see if this particular entrepreneur or this particular startup kind of fits into that, right? So in most cases, in emerging ecosystems like in India, we didn't have patterns, because if we took the patterns from the Valley or took the patterns from China and applied it to the stage that we were in our ecosystem and in our journey, both the stage of the consumer, the stage of the ability to monetize something, and the stage of the support ecosystem. For example, I mean, we always quote this, I know it's an old example now, but when Flipkart started, they didn't have FedEx to do their deliveries. They didn't have Visa or MasterCard to depend on payment. So you had to kind of become FedEx plus Visa plus everything in one, right? So pattern matching becomes more and more prevalent in my sense, and also you can garner a good deal of success as the ecosystems mature, and especially for the established categories and the established sectors. But
Got it.
anytime you're talking about a new sector or a new category, and which is what we try to do through our preparation process. So we, like I said, it was e-commerce, and then SaaS, then it was B2B. We kind of created the whole B2B ecosystem in India, and agri-tech, right? More recently. So these were, there is no pattern or there is no history to agri-tech in this country. What do you pattern match, right? The consumer also is not digitally savvy. So there is no, you can't take the urban consumer patterns and even match it to the rural consumer pattern. The logistics that had started to work in urban India now, of course, is not going to work to deliver something to this farmer in some very small village. And the supply chains that you're dealing with are very different. So all aspects of the business are very different. So what do you pattern match in terms of who can succeed and what kind of a business can succeed there? So if you want to, so in venture, I think staying ahead of the emerging categories and defining some of these emerging categories are going to give you the largest outcomes, right? And for that, you need to look beyond pattern matching, and of course, always there is a level of intuition and history that you rely upon, but there's going to be many more aspects that you need to kind of think through or relate to in the emerging space, based on which you would make your decisions than the just intuitions and patterns.
Yeah, no, I think I love the emphasis on first principles thinking there on and on not relying on patterns, because I think more often than not, they can tend to not identify patterns by definition, don't identify outliers, because outliers don't match patterns. But I think that emphasis was lovely. And I think that just sets us up wonderfully well for the end of the conversation, where I would like to take a moment and ask you about your personal beliefs as well, and what you've done for the ecosystem at large, because I think you've been in Bangalore, Karnataka from the very start, right? And you've seen the ecosystem grow. Accel was a first mover in the venture ecosystem, and legend has it, and I spoke to a bunch of folks, founders and folks from Accel, and folks called you, the kindest investor. Help us understand this entire, persona that you've been able to establish. How much of it attributes to experience? How much of it has just been, developing yourself along the way? But how have you eventually boiled down to somebody who's kind, who wants to give back to the community, either by, initiatives like ACE Act, or you also are closely involved with the Karnataka government, any of those aspects? I think that will be a good segue to understand, how the journey builds a person, especially in your case.
So I think the first phase of my journey was the entrepreneurial journey. The second phase of my journey has been and continues to be as an investor, as a venture investor. Over the last decade, I've been trying to see, can we take some of these learnings again from the venture ecosystem and apply it for parts of society or parts of our country and the ecosystem, which have not been able, where you have huge problems, societal problems, whether it's in education and environment, and where definitely my big belief is that startups are playing a role to solve some of them, right? So and there are jobs which are being created as part of the startup ecosystem, which will help in solving employability and some of these areas. But are there problems at the fringes, and are the problems today that are not still economically in the sweet spot or the wheelhouse of venture investing, that I should be looking at and take and transform some of these learnings from here to there? And an point in cases, the NGO ecosystem in the country. I think the NGO ecosystem, is equivalent to maybe a very old traditional slow-moving company prior to the startup ecosystem kind of disrupting everything, right? So can you take some of the same learnings that that make these high impactful startups create change in very short periods of time, disrupt spaces in very small periods of time? Can you take that to the NGO ecosystem, right? So that's where my first part of the journey started. So can I look at redefining, and you may call it NGO 2.0, or you can call it social entrepreneurship, you can call it impact investing. I mean, there are, and today it's also converging a little bit with ESG becoming important. So this whole venture and impact investing. But so that's where the seed of the thought was, that taking some of these learnings to areas which are not touched by some of the ideas of bias for action, urgency, ability to get access to capital. All of these have not touched some of these areas, and can you start making an impact there? So that's where I kind of evolved a little bit of a structure for myself. At a global level, I would like to be involved in the environment space, because I think it touches everybody across this world. No matter where you live, you want to breathe clean air, and you want to drink clean water, and you don't want to kill this planet and make it still a viable place for the next generation, right? So that is everybody's mission. I think, or at least everybody would kind of attest to that mission anywhere in the world. So that's my high level kind of one area of impact that I work with. The second area is, I think, more of a national impact. I think we have 600 million people who have been in some way linked to the farming ecosystem. They have been for multitude of reasons which we can discuss forever. But the fact is that if you don't take care of these 600 million people, even if we become a $6 trillion economy, you will have two Indias. And and it is very dangerous in any economy or in any country to have this big kind of chasm between one part of the country and or one demographic in the country and the second demographic. So I agree. So to be able to either further the mission of the Prime Minister, or even otherwise just do something that's pragmatic and necessary, which is double every farmer's income in a reasonable amount of time, is kind of my national mission. So you have a global mission, then I have a national mission, and then I have a mission within my city, which is, Bangalore has been fortunate to have, I believe, the best weather in the world. Bangalore is very fortunate to have had the best like-minded people come and make this their home and use this to pursue their dream and actually build something for this nation. We have to ensure that this city remains sustainable, that the city does not get out of depth, so to speak, in terms of its own capability to support this kind of a thriving set of activities, right? Whether it's startup or whether it is the next space tech initiatives. So in many ways, this is a unique melting pot in this country. So I try to do whatever I can in my capacity to improve the lakes of the city, to improve the solid waste management problems, the waste, everything to do with waste in the city, to improve the infamous traffic challenges and whatever can be done in that space. So all of this requires working very closely with the government. And so I've kind of tried to build this tripartite kind of a model for Bangalore, where you kind of get corporate and startup participation, and then you have the not-for-profit or the Section 8 or the NGO kind of component, and then you have the government, because ultimately, no matter what ideas and thoughts that you incubate. To accelerate that and to take it to scale in many of these areas, you need to work with the government, right? So for me, this is kind of a little bit of an incubator, and some of these have then helped me do in the agri. In addition to what I do with agri-tech startups, there is a NASCOM mission that I have started called Krishi Kalpa, which brings together startups and FPOs and other parts of the agri ecosystem with this mission of bringing new energy and accelerating the farming ecosystem. And similarly in ACT, we are working on environment. So me and GB from Sequoia are anchoring the environmental vertical and seeing what we can do for India and also take it to the rest of the world.
That's very, very commendable, I must mention, because I think we need more folks from the ecosystem like you who are thinking on a more ecosystem first large aspect. I'm sure everybody does, but to hear the execution on your part is commendable. And I think the more the merrier in this aspect, and it's all net positive when it comes to this. And hopefully all of these initiatives, achieve the objectives that you set out to achieve, because I'm sure everyone is rooting for the success of it. This has been wonderful, Prashanth, and I have one final question as we end the conversation, which has been fantastic. But as we enter the mega decade, and we've already seen the success that 2020-21 has landed us, despite what has been a terrible year for the world in general. But as we enter this mega year, what do you have to, perhaps mention to the young entrepreneurs listening to you and even the young venture investors? And where do you see India headed on a more general stereotypical note? But I think your closing arguments and thoughts on this would be wonderful to hear. And thanks again for this opportunity.
So I think we have finally hit that perfect storm in India, or a purple patch, so to speak, right? And this has happened because of various global circumstances. The whole China plus one thing, where now investors clearly believe globally that India merits. We are not an option, a second option to China or a second option to somebody else. In fact, I was telling somebody that we should not call ourselves the Silicon Valley of Bangalore or the Silicon Valley of India. I think India now merits a new name.
Yeah.
Right. Where this is even in isolation, or even on its own, now a very vibrant hotspot, unlike anything else in the world, unique in it, and will have its own place in this decade. And what we are seeing right now, like you said, this momentum is just the starting part of it, the first 2 years. But I think the decade that we were always waiting for India, which will hopefully accelerate and take us from this 3 trillion to the 6 trillion. And in the 6 trillion, a major component of this, almost 2 trillion, coming from the startup and the digital ecosystem, I think seems more real now than ever before. So just the very best time for entrepreneurs and people who want to stay back in India and build for the country and build from India for the rest of the world.
Absolutely. I think that's a wonderful note to close this conversation. Thank you so much, Prashanth, for your time. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I've certainly learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone listening in will as well. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
Really enjoyed it, Jivraj. I mean, good luck to you. And is this your which number of podcast is this?
70th.
70th. Amazing. So all the best, and hopefully see you get to the 100 very soon.
Thank you so much, Prashanth.